Hello, everyone. It's Friday night, TGIF. I hope you guys have your cocktails and popcorn ready because we're going to talk about the SHIT storm I walked into by accident yesterday and what I woke up to today and dealt with this afternoon, which in my career, I've dealt with a lot of unstable people. I have written stories about a woman that literally thinks cabbage will make you regrow limbs and cure your homosexuality. I have written about men who lead massive anti-vax groups and con parents to make them donate money to GoFundMe's to fund his lifestyle. I've dealt with a doctor who works in like another country that literally thinks she can cure autism but has no credentials. I've covered a lot of loons in my time, and I've gone after and maybe exposed a lot of people. Typically when I'm looking at an exposing type or investigating something, it's something that I'm doing intentionally, not accidentally. And I have to say that what happened to me yesterday was sort of walking into an accidental scam fest and imposter. And it all happened because I thought that I was talking to someone connected to Gypsy Rose Blanchard, someone that I've covered extensively on my blog on Pathios and on my YouTube channel. And it's a case that I've been interested in because if you know me, I am someone that is fascinated with individuals that have a disorder called fictitious disorder imposed on another, which is the current DSM-5 word for the former Munchausen's by proxy. Now, a lot of people still refer to it as MBP because that's how it's more well known. And for that purpose, I guess we can just call it that since that's what you guys know. So I believe I had been covering another case that actually isn't necessarily MBP by a woman named Susan Schofield. Now her case actually they're not sure that she actually has it. It's more that she might have undiagnosed or she has diagnosed bipolar disorder that isn't being treated, and her abuse of her children could maybe be more related to her paranoia and delusions from her illness. Now, in the case of Dee Dee Blanchard, in Gypsy Rose Blanchard, experts were never able to diagnose her. However, she meets a lot of the criteria of an individual with Munchausen's by proxy because she is a caregiver who had a nursing background, who seemed to like the attention and accolades that she got of caring for a child that was ill. She fabricated illnesses and put her child through numerous procedures in order to gain sympathy and attention for caring for and being the martyr to her daughter. But Dee Dee is an interesting because she is also a malingerer. And a malingerer is someone that fakes and feigns illness to gain financial incentive. Dee Dee was very good at this, and she was able to obtain a home through Habitat Through Humanity and use her con to get all kinds of cash and benefits and services for her daughter that actually had literally nothing wrong with her. It's a unique case because as well, Dee Dee was killed by her daughter Gypsy and Nicholas Godejohn. Okay, so a lot of people will say, well, it's not that different, or it's this or that or whatever, okay? So in my experience, I've covered about 8 of these cases. Dee Dee's pretty typical. And the cases I've covered of adults that come out of this, I've had people that have reached out to me and said, hey, I'm 26 years old and I literally just left my house because my mom had this, or, it's a really... It's a lot more prevalent than you would think, and the women seem to share the same patterns, and Dee Dee had a lot of those same patterns. And because of my interest in it, I covered Gypsy. Now, I never intended to actually be a part of the story. I never intended to get to know any of the people involved. I simply was a wide-eyed view and researcher of the case, not necessarily involved in groups or anything like that. And in July, an article in Touch magazine was reported that Gypsy had become engaged, and a photo of her boyfriend or her fiance, Ken, was made public. And in an article, Fancy Maselli, or that's her stage name, but her actual legal name is April Johns. I'm not sure why she goes by Fancy, because literally has a stage name, but she has no credits. In fact, she has no experience that I could find in anything to do with the entertainment industry. And so it's odd to have a stage name without a stage. But I digress. So April Johns was her name, but in the press they called her Fancy Maselli, and she was everywhere suddenly. I thought it was really odd because for the longest time the family seemed to speak for themselves. Generally you would see direct quotes from Gypsy or from Christy or Rod Blanchard. Suddenly around this spring, maybe it was, Fancy just started popping up in all of these articles, and I was like, who is this chick? Well, anyways, in July, she started quoting about how Gypsy was getting engaged and the family wasn't supportive. And the In Touch article made it seem like mom and dad, Christy and Rod, didn't want this to happen. And she also told them that Gypsy and Ken were planning to get married in July. Or no, in January of 2020. Okay? So shortly after that happens, I report what was in the In Touch article. I talked just sort of about my own opinions, about what I thought about Gypsy getting married without having any life experience, kind of what I thought might be good for her. Nothing like groundbreaking. I wasn't breaking the story. I didn't interview these people. It was really more just commentary on a story. That's what I do on my channel. And I had a comment from Fancy in my comments in the video basically saying, hey, this is Fancy Maselli. I would love to clear up some things that you have said incorrectly in this thing, and we've noticed that you do a lot of great work with MPB and you've been covering Susan Schofield, and we'd be interested in potentially having you help us with our new series By Proxy, and potentially have you maybe talk with Gypsy at some point. Okay, piqued my interest. However, I reached out to her, she provided me an email, and I never heard back from her. So I was like, well, I probably won't hear from her again, not a big deal, no big whoop. I didn't pay attention to anything. Like I said, I don't go on to Facebook very often, I'm not in any groups, so I had no idea that behind the scenes, things were falling apart. And the things that were falling apart were that Gypsy and Christy Blanchard were separating from the By Proxy production for a myriad of reasons, and I had no idea. And so a couple weeks ago, when a story broke that Gypsy and Ken broke up, I simply reached out to Fancy thinking, well, maybe I could get a comment because she has like declared herself the spokesperson, and I didn't really expect like to hear back. I ask a lot of questions and not everyone responds. And she responded and she was just like, oh, no comment. She didn't tell me at the time that she wasn't working with Gypsy. She didn't disclose to me at that time that she was not in like cahoots still with Gypsy and Christy. In fact, at the time, 2 weeks ago, she made no mention that she was no longer the spokesperson. So I was still under the impression that she was connected to the family. So I then sent her a message and let her know that my friend had been helping her do some stuff, and my friend and I had been working together on another case for Susan Schofield. I trust this friend tremendously. We've become, I would say, relatively close, and we talk a lot about these kinds of cases. We help each other. We give each other resources. And so my friend said, oh, they want to talk to you. They were thinking maybe you could help them. And so I said, oh, my friend said that you might want to talk to me. And she's like, oh, I didn't realize that was you. Yes, we still want to talk to you about this project. Again, did not tell me that she was no longer connected to Gypsy. This entire time, I'm still assuming she's connected to Gypsy. Had at this point I known that she wasn't connected to Gypsy, I would not have continued the conversation because I really didn't have an interest in being part of like a series that might or might not happen. That's not really what I do. So Couple weeks go by and I don't really hear anything from her. And then she's like, well, would you like to talk? And so we set up a conversation and she's like, well, I can give you a call or we can do a Zoom conversation. I still at this point have no idea. How many times can I tell you guys I have no idea she's not connected to the family? Not one. She never discloses this. And this is really unprofessional, by the way. If you think somebody is coming to you because they assume that you're connected to the family, and you believe that this is a source for you because of that, you should tell them you're not associated. But they decided not to. And so I agreed to this meeting when I really didn't have the time, by the way. I was dealing with a lot of other stories at the time. It wasn't something I could have spent my hour doing something more productive than what happened. And so I end up on a Zoom call, and within minutes, it starts to be recorded. I was never under the impression that this conversation was an interview, like they were interviewing me. I thought that this was just a dialogue of, hey, can we just talk a little bit about like what you do and who you are and like get an idea of like what your project's about. Like that's really what I thought this conversation was going to be about. I didn't think it was like an interview that they needed to record. But suddenly they're recording a conversation without my consent, and by the time she tells me, it's already recording. And in that position, I'm not the kind of person that will rock a boat, but I thought it was odd. I'm like, why is she recording this? This is weird. So I was like, whatever, it's fine. But I knew in the back of the mind that this recording was going to come back to haunt me, and it did today. So through the conversation, it was an SHIT storm. I can't even tell you the level of unprofessionalism I was dealing with when I was talking to these people. So within minutes of talking to them, they're not only recording a conversation I didn't think that was recordable, then they disclose finally, she brings on a third person who I didn't know was going to be a part of the conversation. I thought this conversation was going to be just one-on-one, and it comes on to another person. I have no idea who she was. Her name was Brandy. Now, these two are nice enough women, but then they're like, oh yeah, so we're not working with them anymore. We actually had a mutual parting of ways. Okay. So I felt completely misled. But I'm a professional, and I felt like, okay, maybe there's a story here that I need to stay for. Maybe there's a reason I should stay and listen to this, because this might be a story that I need to know about. I, at this point, when she told me she was not connected, had zero interest in working with her, but I humored them and listened to them talk. And as I listened and talked with them, I realized very quickly that these two knew nothing about the disorder that they claimed to be doing a documentary on. I was like, wait a minute, your show is called By Proxy, but they knew nothing about Munchausen's by proxy, which I thought was weird. Like, how do you not know after 2 years anything about this disorder? And then they start asking me questions. And so they're like, well, isn't it like this and isn't it like that? And I explain where I'm coming from, and I tell them what it's about, and I tell them about sort of how the women are that do this, because, and I say women because in 90% of the cases, it's a caregiver that's a woman. It's very, very rarely a man. And I was trying to explain to them how the systemic abuse and it's like a very mental and psychological abuse that the victims go through, that almost all the children that are a part of this become complicit and a part of the entire scam, not intentionally, but because mom or dad or whoever's doing this has them fearful of a punishment, and if they don't do it or follow the rules, then a punishment will happen. And so this is always how I've seen Gypsy, and in all the documentaries that they've done on her and all the discovery and all the experts that have spoken out and worked with her, every single one of them have said that she's a product of a mother who had a borderline personality disorder, which is typically like Munchausen's by proxy and borderline are similar. They're not the same, but a lot of mothers that have it are both, okay? And so they lie. They lie a lot. They lie so much that they don't know when to stop lying. And what happens for the kids is that the kids learn how to lie and manipulate because that's what they're taught. And they don't necessarily know that they're scamming. They don't know that they're lying because it's the only thing they know. And that's literally how they grow up. And in Gypsy's case, it was unique because she was kept away from every single mandated reporter, and that was strategic on the hands of Dee Dee because she was able to keep the scam going on longer because she was a malingerer and depended on the income that Gypsy afforded her in her life. Without the income she received through Gypsy, she would have had to find another scam. So instead, she kept Gypsy isolated from everyone so she could continue to do what she needed to do to make the money she needed to make, which is two separate diagnoses, but can exist together. So a lot of people will say, well, this is a unique case. It's really not. I've seen a lot of these. I've seen them connected. Probably the biggest difference is that Gypsy actually killed her mother. But in some cases, these mothers end up killing their children. So in a lot of these cases, it ends up being literally killed or be killed. And that's why experts that were part of the case and that have done documentaries, and the individuals that were part of the HBO documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest talked a lot about Gypsy's sort of that juxtaposition of where she had to make a decision and she didn't feel like she had any other way out. Was Gypsy a liar? Yes. Was Gypsy a manipulator? Yes. Did Gypsy manipulate Nick? Yes. Did she lie to police? Yes. But she also didn't learn anything else. Her mother didn't educate her, and she was like a product of a very dysfunctional life. So I'm trying to tell them all of this, and they're literally telling me, nope, that's not possible. This is different. We know something totally different, you guys. We have seen everything here. We have all the documents. We have all the discovery. And we believe that Gypsy was complicit in this and that Gypsy at some time became a part of this. And Gypsy was the person that was like the person that basically was the scammer at the end. She had all the control. She was controlling Dee Dee. She had all the power. Not possible. Absolutely not possible. Impossible, in fact. But I listened and I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. I asked them multiple times, well, have you had anyone come in, a doctor that specializes in MBP, to help you sort of understand the nuances of both the parent, the caregiver, and the child? Nope. In 2 years, they had never had any single person come in to teach them about this. Then they start talking to me about, which was really weird to me, how are you 2 years into a project and you literally know nothing about the disorder? That's ridiculous. Ridiculous, okay? Then they start talking about Nicholas Godejohn, I'm sorry. And he has autism, right? And his diet, he has an IQ of 82. And they start telling me that there's zero way that because he can speak really well and he comes off very smart, there's no way he could have been so easily manipulated, and he's not as he doesn't have the deficiencies that they claim, and he's faking it, and all of this is fake, and he doesn't have dissociative DID, where the split personality disorder, none of that. That's all from BDSM. That's all his stuff. So basically, they were trying to lead me to believe that Gypsy and Nick were two of the biggest con artists in the entire world. This whole thing was done as a way for Gypsy to literally be with Nick so she could get away from her from her mom. What? No. What's actually here going on is that I had to they said to me, well, I said, do you even know anything about autism? And they were like, well, isn't it I don't know, a neurological thing? And I was like, actually, it is a neurological disorder, but it's considered a developmental disability. And I said, do you know what his IQ is? And they said, yeah, I think it's 82. And I said, okay, so he has 82 IQ, and he has what? ASD, Asperger's? Yeah. Okay. So he's extremely vulnerable due to his lower than normal IQ, with an ASD making his social functioning, probably having processing speeds at a functioning level of around, I don't know, low 70s, because typically children with autism, they don't have, especially on the ASD, like the higher end of the spectrum, they usually have pretty high verbal IQs, which is why you can understand and he can speak so eloquently, but it would take him a longer time to process and understand and remember, and he might have issues with rage and frustration because of that inability to process things. And in his Oxygen interview, he talked a lot about that frustration he felt, where it was like everything was going on in his life so fast around him and he couldn't always process everything, and he always needed extra time and he always had to relearn things. And that's really super common because working memory in individuals with autism is generally lower in the IQ. People with autism typically have what's called a split IQ or a splinter IQ, where they're really high in some places and really low in other places. And it makes them incredibly vulnerable, meaning he might appear very smart, but he's also extremely malleable and easily manipulated and also easily influenced. So someone who may or may not be naturally violent could be influenced to do something that they might not do because they really believe that they're going to help this person, or they really believe that this is going to get them their desired goal. And they said to me, well, would your son be convinced to do something like Nick? And I said, yep. And their mouths dropped open. They're like, what? You're like the first person that's ever said that. And I was like, what? How many people have you talked to that have kids with autism? Kids with autism could be like convinced to eat paper or garbage out of a garbage pail. If you get them and influence them and manipulate them, they are so easy. And that's why they're considered vulnerable adults. And that's why we should be kind to them and not do that kind of stuff. They didn't really understand that. They didn't seem to understand autism. They didn't understand Munchausen's. They didn't understand anything. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Then they start bashing Gypsy and Christy. And I'm like, what the hell did I just walk into? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. They're literally telling me that Christy is a fame whore, that all she's doing is for attention, that she does this to take trips, that she doesn't even care about Gypsy. Oh, then she says that Rod wanted nothing to do with her. And I was like, I would try to interrupt them and say, well, individuals like Dee Dee typically practice what's called alienation and isolation. And what they do is they usually are either married at one point and end up becoming separated, or they completely like put up a wall between their partner or the father in the caregiving. So the father is left completely out of the blue. They don't tell them anything. They push them out. If they stay in a relationship, the dad is just like out of the picture in terms of the medical care. But more often than not, in a lot of these situations, these women end up divorcing the fathers and separating the child and moving away, which is exactly what happened with Gypsy. And they kept saying, but this is such a different case. You don't understand. And I'm like, it's really not. It's actually pretty classical if you look at the diagnostics. They didn't want to hear it. They were like, well, you don't understand. We have all of this information. We know so much. This family is really bad. Like, and then they start talking about Hulu. And I said, well, didn't they already do a docuseries about Gypsy? Like, why are you guys going to do another one? Well, that one didn't really include Gypsy's story, and they fictionalize things. Okay, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, in my brain, I'm like categorizing all of this, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. They've already had Mommy, Dad, and Dearest. They've done a show on Oxygen. They've had 2020. They've been on Dr. Phil. They've had The Act on Hulu. Like, what more are you going to add to the story that hasn't already been shared? Literally. At this point, adding more stories for Gypsy just further exploits the story, muddies the water, and just doesn't allow this girl to like move on. Like, at some point in time, you kind of just have to let the chips fall, the dust settle, and just stop. Like, it's probably why, we don't like do movies about John Bonet or Eric Menendez or Scott Peterson. You just have to move on and just like let these people have their lives. But she's like, they're convinced that they have the secret. The golden ticket is what I think of it. It's like they are like the ones that are in Willy Wonka and they're like, I know the secret. I got the golden ticket. And it's like, it reminded me of like Jillian Epperly when she's like, cabbage juice will help you grow limbs. Like, we know something that you don't. No, you don't. What do you not, how did that, you're telling me that producers at HBO that have like skilled like time and effort and did like all this digging into the past of Dee Dee, knew everything about what was going on in her life, talked to Christy, talked to Rod, everything that was included. Like, how do you know more? How do you know more than Michelle Dean that did Hulu? How do you possibly know more? What, because you have a 4-hour interrogation of 3 years ago? Then they start explaining to me, oh yeah, the family's mad that we released the 4-hour interrogation of him and the 12-hour interrogation of Nick, and they're mad about some photos that we put online. Anyways, long story short, this is such a mess. I'm like trying my best to just like get through this without like rolling my eyes or I was trying to just sit there very stoically and engaged and professional because I didn't want to like ruin anything, right? So they're like, okay, when we're done, why don't you join our group on Facebook and then check out our page on Facebook and then we can talk and maybe I'll give you an exclusive. And I was like, okay. Basically, and then the one thing that really sort of bothered me was, and this is the part that made me really think I needed to go follow like when somebody's like Hansel and Gretel, they drop you a little like crumb. She said, Christy Blanchard is worse than Dee Dee. She is worse. She is manipulative. She could hurt someone worse than Dee Dee. And I thought, whoa, that's a bold allegation for someone that's literally never been in trouble. Weird. So I go into their group and I start seeing all these random lives and they post everything. It's like, what the hell is this? They go live to talk about all the things that they know and dissect a crime that's happened like 4 years ago. And all they do is badmouth people that are on the other side. I find all these screenshots about like Gypsy and how like they don't like her. And thank you guys all for your super chats. This is awesome. Thank you, by the way. I wasn't expecting this. This is really just me venting because today was a really ridiculous day. So, anyways, I end up in the group and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I see all this stuff about Christy and about Gypsy, and I'm like, there has got to be more to the story. Way more. So I end up reaching out to Chris. Well, before I even sent a message to Christy, I did a background check on Fancy because I was like, well, something's got to be weird. So I find this like page called, I don't even remember, like Fake By Proxy by accident. And it had her real name, April Johns. So I was able to run a background check and I found out she had criminal convictions, like 12 evictions, like all kinds of like fraud in her background and non-payment and judgments. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I mean, I try not to judge people, but like not paying your rent 12 times and getting kicked out 12 times, that's like kind of a pattern. That's not like, I don't know, like, I just don't think that's okay. Like, I really hate people that don't pay their dues. I mean, I understand we all fall on hard times, but 12 times is excessive. And I see mugshots of her, and I'm like, okay, this is like, okay, there's something going on here, right? And I'm like, this is weird. And then I try to Google her name to see if I can find anything related to the entertainment industry, an IMB or an IMD thing. All I see literally is like a page that she created that had 2 pre-production things that she said that she was creating that didn't have websites, that didn't have anybody involved in it, and that she was on a podcast that she self-produced and then worked with this other guy that produced another podcast. But in the world of like online media, that would be like me saying, I'm going to write the next book and fund it for you. Or I'm going to write the next like blockbuster and fund it for you. I'm just some YouTube journalist that happens to have a blog on Pathios, literally. Like I'm nobody in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so when I'm starting to figure out that this is not passing the sniff test based on what I'm seeing in the group, all of the extensive amounts of lives where it seems like this is all just a grab for attention and sort of fame, I felt like she was maybe using the family and maybe a clout chaser that had convinced the family to do something that was never going to happen. Then I happened to have a friend who got involved with this company. And I think I told you about that earlier. And through that, I sort of learned a few more things, and I was like, okay, all right. I promised my friend I wouldn't drop anything, but I'm just going to say, like, okay, yeah, wink, you guys should figure it out. And then I was like, all right, I have to reach out to Christy. Even if she doesn't respond to me, at least I have to, like, try to get the other side of the story, right? It would be completely irresponsible of me not to, because there's nothing publicly said by either party. So it's like, I have to hear the other side of this. So I reached out to her and I said, listen, like, I'm Katie. I run a YouTube channel called Without a Crystal Ball. I'm a writer. I've been primarily moving towards my YouTube channel because it's just, like, way more fun for me. And she responded, and she was super funny because, like, one of the very first things she said to me is, I knew who you were immediately. I've seen your videos on Love After Lockup. And I was like, that's hilarious. Like, who would have thought that, like, Christy Blanchard watched me just to, like, talk about, like, my gossiping about reality TV, right? Like, you never really know who's watching your stuff. And so she's like, yeah, I'm a fan. I watch your stuff. I really think you're funny. She's like, so as soon as I figured out it was you, I was like, of course I'll talk to you. And so then I start asking her some questions, and she starts filling in some blanks for me, and she tells me a few things. So I want to show you something. One of the things that, well, first of all, after I talked to Christy, well, actually, no, let's start right there. One of the things that Christy said to me, or that they said, Fancy and Brenda told me, was that I said, why did the Hulu thing fall apart? Like, why didn't they work with the family? And she said, because Michelle didn't want to work with them because the family's crazy. Well, then Christy provided this to me, which is a screenshot of the family deciding not to work with Hulu. Not the other way around. And Michelle Dean of The Act hoping to repair the relationship to move forward. There was some philosophical differences on the direction of the project that they couldn't agree upon, and so the family decided to cut ties. It wasn't Michelle that didn't want to work with them because the family was crazy. So that was one of the lies that she told me. She told me that everyone hates Ken. Like, Ken's super controlling, who's Gypsy's fiance. And so I said to Christy, I'm like, do you guys like Ken? And they're like, she's like, oh yeah, he's wonderful. He's such a nice guy. And I said, is he controlling? No. He's just got, he's sweet. He's really nice. He cares so much about Gypsy. They have such a nice relationship. He's really there for her. He's a friend that she needs. I said, do you have concerns? And she's like, well, I think all parents have concerns. But Gypsy's an adult and she needs to make her own decisions, which I totally understand. Like, she hasn't had that opportunity. And they said, at this point, we just really want to support her. And then another allegation that they made was that Gypsy took no steps to get better, and that she had somehow, like, not been doing any psychiatric help in the prison, which I asked Christy, and Christy was like, well, no, I mean, she doesn't have the one-on-one care, but we're working on that right now with Dr. Phil to get a psychologist to come in at least once a week to help with her. But in the meantime, she's been taking different classes. She's been enrolled in anger management. She does a women's group. She's currently starting another group about something like related to relationships, and then another one related to something else. So she's like, it's not ideal, but we are hoping to find her more. And I said, oh, so it's not like you guys, she doesn't need anything. She's like, oh, no. She needs help. Yeah. And I said, well, do you think she's, like, progressing? Is she getting better? She's like, yeah, she's getting better, but it's a work in progress. She went through a lot as a kid, and it's not going to get changed overnight. She said she has changed so much between the time that she was arrested to today, and she will continue to get better, but there's patterns of behavior that need to, be squashed and relearned. And they were pretty honest about it, but they said they loved her, they supported her, they did whatever they could. And I said, well, are you and Gypsy, like, are you estranged? Because that was another thing they said. And she said, absolutely not. We've had some, like anything. We have some disagreements, but everything is fine now. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And then I asked, like, well, how involved was your husband? And did you know that Gypsy could walk? Did you know about all of these things? Because publicly, they had always said they didn't know any of these things. And Fancy and Brenda were adamant that the parents knew all of this, that Christy and Rod knew all of this, and that they just allowed Dee Dee to do this to her and did nothing to stop it. And she was like, Dee Dee really kept us out of the blue, like she really isolated us, didn't tell us very much. Their conversations with Gypsy were very high level. They didn't really have much of an idea. They knew she could walk as a child when she was really, really young, but they hadn't seen her walk in years. So when they saw her walk after she was arrested, it was shocking. After talking to Christy, I was like, she doesn't seem really that bad. I mean, like, I was like, well, what about this, like, you're fame hungry, you're an attention seeker? And she's like, what? She's like, I've got kids, I got stuff to do, like, it's been really stressful. Like, my impression of Christy was more like, this is a family that's been thrown into a tornado mixed into a typhoon and slammed by a tsunami. I mean, imagine having to deal with the kind of attention that they have and navigate that with no media experience, and then navigate scammers, i.e. Fancy, to determine, like, who has the right intentions and who doesn't. It's pretty easy to be taken advantage of when you're green. So after talking to Christy, I was like, all right, I did my stream, I talked about it. I tried to be really diplomatic, you guys. I didn't want to expose Fancy, even though I thought she was a total fraud. I didn't want to say that. I was going to be like, all right, like, this is one thing, this is the other thing. But then, today, that happened. And this is when I got angry. Because she basically said that Christy manipulated me. And that it's so ridiculous what she says here. It's laughable for her to assume that I'm so easily manipulated, and it's insinuating that, you know, the Southern Cajun woman could somehow change my entire impression of her, and that I would suddenly stop wanting to talk with them, and I would flip the script so quickly. It had nothing to do with the fact that she lied to me to get me on the phone. She never disclosed to me that she was separated from the family. She recorded the call with no reason. She completely bashed Gypsy and Christy while I was talking to them, disregarded everything that I had to say about the disorder and all of my expertise in terms of covering cases like this. And then after finding 12 convictions and arrests and a massive storm of people that she has blocked or screamed at, or all the fights she's gotten into, it's like the most unprofessional mess I've ever seen in terms of a production. I've been around a lot of people in the media, and I've literally never seen anything like this. And I was like, this is the most unprofessional thing ever. And then to have my entire conversation over the course of weeks put on Facebook with the idea that we're going to post the entire video of me talking to them, and that we feel that Katie was 100% wrong in how she handled the situation. We all feel that she was taken in by the sweet Cajun woman, and this is why she reacted so poorly. So she's saying that I'm reacting so poorly and don't like them anymore because Christy manipulated me, and I'm just so stupid that I couldn't figure out that she had 12 convictions and forged Gypsy's signature. Because I have that too, girl. Then she posted my entire interview with them that, again, I did not know was going to be recorded until the very minute it was recorded. Yeah, this is all on here. And that video is on YouTube, you guys. Making me look like I'm some pansy that doesn't know how to do research and easily influenced. No. When I saw that, I was like, bitch, hold my beer. So, then I was like, well, let's talk about the things that she said. Please. this is why I don't think that anyone should work with her in terms of, well, not anyone. I wouldn't say anyone. I mean, some people will want to work with her, but this is why I feel the family might not have wanted to work with her. Here is something that she said about Gypsy. I'm so sick of Gypsy. Like, I honestly want to bury her so far down a rabbit hole, and honestly think if I dig enough, I could make her look so effing bad. She calls Christy a liar, a fake, not a good mother or a stepmother, that Christy is only out for Christy. She comes up with conspiracies about how the breakup that occurred between Gypsy and Nick was a PR stunt to get attention. P.S. She had no communication with them at this time. And remember, I told you I reached out to her for a comment, assuming she was connected. Instead of telling me that she was not connected to them, she said, no comment. I don't want to talk about it. Oh, we can talk about it later. I'll let you know. And then she says, what's really funny is this whole SHIT about Gypsy's effing fiance is that we don't like him at all either. And we think the pictures are super weird too. Talking about the pictures of Ken and Gypsy at the prison. And then I really feel like Gypsy is still being fed lie after lie and doesn't have the capacity to even really understand what's happening. And then here is where she forged Gypsy's name onto a life contract with By Proxy. The top is the contract for By Proxy, and the bottom is Gypsy's actual handwriting. They're not even remotely the same. Gypsy never agreed to do this documentary, never agreed to be a part of it, and instead, when she couldn't get her on board, she just signed it for her. There were so many things here. I mean, then there's this whole Ken. Ken sends her a message telling her how much he doesn't like her. Why do you need to be doing this? What more of the story needs to be told? How many more people need to write this story? I mean, Ken has a lot of the same feelings I do. What more do we need to say about this story? Do we really need a 13-part episode with more information of all the information that you know? And then when I finally questioned her again and I said, I'm still concerned why, after 2 years, you know nothing about this disorder, she said, I don't really think it's your place to tell me how to do my research. And I said, well, as someone that investigates and covers these stories, and if you're going to do a production about that, I would hope to God you would know what you're talking about. But she didn't. And it was at that point I decided I had to speak out. I'm not an unprofessional person, but I don't like people that take advantage of other people. And what I think happened here is that maybe it started out with all the best intentions, but Christy and Rod were very naive. They knew nothing about her, and they just assumed the best in them. Am I saying that Christy and Rod are the perfect parents or that Gypsy is without flaw? Absolutely not. But I do know that in situations like this, it's very easy for opportunists like Fancy to come in and promise the world and deliver nothing and offer delays and create drama and cause strife and unnecessary stress in these people's lives. Imagine being Christy, having to deal with all of this on top of the fact that she's lost a ton of family members and she's got her stepdaughter in prison. She and Rod did not ask for this. They are doing the best they can. If she takes a free trip because she gets offered by the Dr. Oz show or the Dr. Phil show, who the hell are we to judge? If she makes a post about wanting to help her daughter potentially get a nose job, who the F cares? Sometimes we analyze and put people under a microscope that's not necessary. This family are victims. Why are we victimizing them again? By proxy is never going to happen. Fancy is what at best a super fan that thought she could write this story. But when you call me out and say that I'm easily manipulated, no. What I am is not easily manipulated, and she couldn't fool me. And I can smell a lie like a fart in the car, Fancy, and yours reeks. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, all of your super chats, all of your help. I will continue to cover this story and try to do my best to be like an advocate for people like Gypsy. I have become, the most amazing part of all of this is I feel like I'm finally, like I've found a friend in Christy. Not that I am going to believe everything she says or think she's, perfect. No. But I think Christy needs support. Whether you like everything she does or not, hell, she's doing her best. And isn't that what we should want out of a mother? We should want her to do the best that she can, given the circumstances she's in. And if you were in that same situation, can you tell me how you would handle it? You can't, because you've never been in that situation, and you probably never will. So be kind, offer her some grace, and stop judging every single thing this family does. Let Gypsy make mistakes. If you don't think it's okay for her to be with Ken, fine. It's not going to matter to her, and your opinion isn't going to influence her. Gypsy is 28 years old. She needs to grow up. She needs to make her own choices, and she needs to stumble and fall and learn. And that's exactly what Christy said to me on the phone. If she doesn't stumble and learn and we all prevent her from making mistakes, she's never going to grow. And I think that's all we want. We want her to grow, we want her to develop, and we want her to become a productive member of society when she's released from prison. So let's all just keep doing what we can do and stop the fighting and stop the drama and stop the obsessiveness around the story. It happened 4 years ago. It's not going to change anything, and trying to find something new that's not there just makes it into a conspiracy in which it's not. I appreciate all of you that have come on and listened to this and heard me speak my truth. This is not a typical thing that I do. I try to stay out of these kinds of messes. And even though I'm frustrated, I still won't stoop to the level that they will. And I won't release the things that they've said to me, because they've literally put all of the information out there without my consent, but I'm not going to have them take it down. I'm just going to let them show and be further proof of the shit show that By Proxy has created. Bye, guys.